Police in the U.S. have been filmed beating back protesters at an ongoing mass demonstration in New York in the biggest event yet in the 3-week-long rally called Occupy Wall Street. There's also reports of pepper spray being used on the crowds and numerous arrests at the rally. Thousands have been taking part in the sustained protest to demand social and economic change. Activists say they're fed up with breaking their backs at work while Wall Street bankers' bonuses keep flowing. For more on this, I'm joined by RT's Marina Portnoy live in New York. Hello, Marina. So how did the protest manage to turn ugly?
Well, Matt, as you mentioned, this protest got very ugly. Before it did, about 10 to 20,000 demonstrators were out on the street. But from what we're being told, mayhem actually broke out when the crowds, part of the crowds that formed in Lower Manhattan by Wall Street, surged past barricades around the New York Stock Exchange, and officers moved in to contain the protesters. From what we saw on the video, officers swatted protesters with batons, sprayed them with mace, pepper spray. According to some reports, even one local news reporter was sprayed with pepper spray. His cameraman was hit with a baton. Things clearly getting violent down by Wall Street as this demonstration was carrying on all day long. Cops have arrested dozens of protesters, but the final tally is not yet known. RT has checked in with the New York City Police Department, and they don't have a final tally yet. Now, let's remind our viewers, this is not the first clash between police officers and anti-Wall Street protesters. We saw last Saturday, nearly 800 of them were arrested in one day when they were taking part in a peaceful protest against corporate influence on U.S. politics, against what they call corporate greed, Wall Street greed. The week before, we also saw several anti-Wall Street protesters that are a part of this group called Occupy Wall Street. They were maced in the face by a police officer. Police officers have used orange netting to get to these protesters that they say are acting disobedient. Civil disobedience is the term the police have used here in New York. But before these clashes took place, we should inform everyone that this demonstration that took place in New York was unprecedented. It was the biggest one thus far by Occupy Wall Street. And that's because a dozen labor unions joined Occupy Wall Street. We saw transport workers, we saw nurses, we saw teachers, students from universities in New York City and throughout the country all walked out of class at a certain time to join the movement that is being held and pioneered by Occupy Wall Street. Now, this movement, we should remind our viewers, is not just limited to New York. It has caught on in cities throughout the country, such as Boston, Los Angeles, Chicago. That's just to name a few. We know one is being planned in Washington, D.C. in the next few days. Now, this is clearly gaining enormous momentum. It's not just a group of activists. These are now all frustrated Americans coming together with grievances about the way the U.S. system is structured and the way the economy is in decline and not benefiting for the common day American.
All right, and briefly, Marina, now you've mentioned that this is, we've seen these protests popping up nationwide in the U.S. in the several big cities. Is there a unified goal, though, from these protesters? I mean, right now it seems that they're protesting more of a concept than actually having a list of serious things that they want changed in America. I mean, is there something that that they have agreed on now as something that they want to accomplish?
Matt, that's a good question, and I don't know if there's one fundamental agreement, but I think they're all coming together because they are frustrated with the way the economy is moving. They feel that bankers and brokers are profiting off the backs of hardworking Americans. They are very, very upset about corporate influence on U.S. politics, the way that campaign contributions are being made to political candidates, both on a presidential level, on a lawmaking level, and then laws are being written to benefit large corporations or financial institutions. Financial institutions such as Wall Street banks are being bailed out when the economy declines and melts, and then they profit a few years later, and the Americans are left footing the bill. They're losing jobs. 45 million Americans are on food stamps. 14 million Americans are unemployed. This is a movement now that is grown into a larger movement about the struggle of the working class American, unemployment, poverty. But what they want is accountability. They want their U.S. system, their leaders, to begin working for all Americans. They don't want the system to continue in a pattern that it has been, where corporations make contributions to, as I mentioned, politicians, and then politicians scratch the back of the corporations. Here's one example I could give you. These protesters, they brought to light the fact that J.P. Morgan Chase recently donated $4.2 million to the New York City Police Department, the largest donation ever made in history. And now these protesters believe that the police officers are not necessarily treating them fairly, that there's being a crackdown on their freedom of speech. But this movement, there is no denying it. It is getting bigger. These people are armed with facts. They're not just going out in the street and screaming. They're media savvy. They have a deep sense of frustration. They feel disenfranchised. They say that they have in part been inspired by the Arab Spring and by all the uprisings they have seen in parts of Europe. And they believe that this is not just a movement that is taking place in the U.S., it's taking place all over the world, but the U.S. is now catching up to it, and they vow to continue. They say this will not be the end, it's just the beginning.
All right. Well, this certainly deserves more discussion than we have time to devote to it right now, but we'll certainly stay with this. RT's Marina Portnoy live for us from New York. Thanks for that report.